So hello, everyone. I will just give it a few seconds for more people to join, but we're delighted to be here with you all this evening. Just give it a couple seconds. Okay, so welcome everyone to the first ever viaGood event, well, online event. We're delighted to have you all with us. I'm Cara Weeks, Chief of Comms here at viaGood, and we hope that this event will inspire you to empower you and your community to take action, putting people and the planet first to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, my colleague Susanna is uploading the programme into the chat in case that's of interest and you want to keep track of where we're at during the event. We have lots of fantastic speakers lined up. Michael Walter, viaGood's founder and CEO, will speak a little bit more about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, shortly. But before that, I wanted to get to know you all a little bit better with a poll. So you should see a poll on your screen at the moment. And it's just a simple question: where are you all joining us from? It's always nice to know where we are in a virtual space, and it's always good to know who our fellow colleagues are on the call. So I'll give you all a couple more minutes to fill that out. Mostly from Europe at the moment, but maybe that will change with time. Wonderful. Couple more seconds. Great. Okay, thank you. So most people joining us are from Europe at the moment, which is interesting. Maybe in the chat you can write where from Europe you're exactly joining us from. But now for some housekeeping. So if we could move on to the next slide. So I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Zoom, but we thought we'd just do this slide for a quick refresher in case you are new or you need a refresher. At the bottom of this screen, you should see a toolbar that looks like this. And you'll see the first icon is a Q&A icon where you can ask a written question to any of the speakers that are coming up. It would just be great if you could put the name of the speaker in the question so that we know who you're wanting to answer it. There's also a chat box, as you can see. In the chat box, as I say, it would be great if you could introduce yourselves, what organizations you're coming from, whether or not you're a student, which cities you're joining from. So please use the chat box. You can also raise your hand using the raise hand icon to ask a spoken question to any of our speakers, and we will just unmute you and show your camera if you'd like. And lastly, there's a reactions button where you can click that to show non-verbal cues, and we'd love for you to give us some love. This slide is all about how to navigate the lobby. Oh, we got some love. It's how to navigate the lobby, and that is a link that my colleague will drop into the chat towards the end of this session. So you can join us for a very relaxed, informal post-event networking. And the way you get there is at the bottom of this screen, which is the lobby. You'll see two icons. One is the main event and one is post-event networking. And if you click on that towards the end of this event, you will join us for some celebratory networking. The last thing to say is on the far right side of this screen, there's a main chat lobby, which will stay open for the next 4 days after this event. So you can sort of ask any questions that are unanswered or start any sort of topics or discussions that you'd like. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to Michael Walter, founder and CEO of viaGood. Over to Michael. Oh, he should be with us. Amazing.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Walter, and I'm from viaGood, and I'm so happy that viaGood is hosting this event. And we have our wonderful guest. You will see them a little bit later. And I would like to speak quickly about SDGs. SDGs, that's 3 words: sustainable Development Goals. So I will start with the development. So now you see on this slide the development of our society, of human beings in the last 40,000 years. On the next slide, you see the development of our society in the last few decades. So you see, we have a problem. The Earth is problem. And so we have to act right now as a human beings. So one of answers for this situation is Sustainable Development Goals, created by United Nations 7 years ago. 7 years ago, that's also the beginning of our project viaGood, which is the mobile app for people who want to do something good and change the situation. But at the beginning, we were a team of 8 enthusiastic software developers. We had a company for mobile apps for commercial use, but we decided in 2017 to create project viaGood and to be a part of changing the world in the meaning of moving to the more sustainable world and just for actually surviving of human beings. So very quickly about our project viaGood. viaGood is a mobile app helping to solve the most critical problems. In viaGood, you can support projects, projects for NGOs doing good things for sustainable activities. You can also join events and create events. You can also sign petitions, and you can create your own community to learn about the problems, about causes. In viaGood, there are 51 causes, from global warming to social causes, and also for saving endangered animals. And right now, we are in the developing the app. We are coming to launch the app, the whole project, in 2023. And actually, where we are aiming, that's a platform for saving the world, platform which supports action at individual, community, and international level. But right now, you can download the app. If you have an iPhone, you can download the app from the App Store, and you can give us feedback. But right now, I would like to invite you to enjoy this event and have a wonderful time with our fantastic guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mikhail. Thank you so much for introducing viaGood and the SDGs. So now I'm going to introduce our first non-viaGood speaker, Ryan De Cruz, who is a program manager at Jane Goodall's Roots Shoots Malaysia, who is a trained architect from Malaysia. Having worked on various residential and resort projects in Bangkok and the Maldives, Ryan now devotes his time to working with the Roots and Shoots to educate, engage, and empower the lives of Malaysian youths, helping them to create positive change for people, animals, and the planet. And Ryan is going to speak all about youth and grassroots community action in achieving the SDGs. So hello, Ryan, and over to you.
Hi, Cara, and thanks for the introduction and the opportunity to share with everyone here today. So as you know, I'm from Roots and Shoots, an organization founded by Dr. Jane Goodall. So next slide. So yeah, to those that don't know Dr. Jane, so in the 1960s and at the age of 26, Dr. Jane decided that she was going to go to Tanzania to study animals. So while there, she studied and lived with the chimpanzees. So she observed that they made tools, and her findings at that time were groundbreaking, because for the longest time, we always thought that it was only man who was the tool maker. So her finding caused us to redefine what it means to be a man. So while she was studying chimpanzees, Dr. Jane later on realized that the forests that the chimpanzees lived were getting smaller, and people from nearby villages were cutting down the forests to clear land for agriculture and for firewood. So she then decided to become a conservationist. She knew that in order to protect the forests and the chimpanzees, she first had to support the community around it. And so this sort of lays the groundwork of what we do here at Roots and Shoots, that we aim to support communities around us with the hope that nature and all living things will be protected. So next slide. So Dr. Jane, when we look at the world around us and the problems that we face, they can often seem very overwhelming or unsurmountable. So even when we look at the SDG goals, they're very broad goals, and sometimes they're very hard to connect to, or they seem very lofty or ideal at times. And so people then often ask, how do I fit into all this, or where do I start? But even before we get into all these questions, we first have to address the first problem that we have, which is climate change, and the problems where everything seems so overwhelming. And Dr. Jane often says, like the one thing that you need to have is hope. And at her age of 88, she still has a lot of hope, despite seeing a lot of destruction and devastation. She still has reasons for hope, and these are her main reasons. And the first is that, the power of the human brain. As much as a lot of the problems that we see today has been caused by humans, we also have the ability to solve them. Another reason to hope is the resilience of nature. And we've seen that in the pandemic in the past 2 years, how if left alone, nature can bounce back. And it's not as frail as we think it is. The next is the power of social media. In my country that I come from, Malaysia, there were times where there were rainforests, protected rainforests that got degazetted as protected in order to make way for development. And social media played a huge, was a huge instrument in the people coming together and, applying so much pressure on the government that they had to roll back on their decisions. And so in the end, they had to maintain the forest as it is because there was just too much pressure from people. So while social media sometimes can often, we hear the detrimental effects of social media, but it is a huge and powerful tool. And I think the same is in the case of viaGood and how it is a source or a power for good. Another reason to hope is the energy of youths. And so this connects to our work at Roots and Shoots, where Dr. Jane has so much hope for youths, the energy that youths bring, the ability for them to solve problems, and that they are the future leaders of tomorrow. So these are the reasons, and of course, the indomitable human spirit. So, we've seen it time and time again that, the human spirit is capable of so many things, from people like Nelson Mandela to even Greta Thunberg, of going against the grain and pushing through in order for things to work and happen. And so these 5 reasons lend itself to why we should do what we need to do and keep doing what we need to do, despite at times it can seem that, the SDG goals they feel daunting, or that we only have 8 years left to the goal. Next slide, please. So at Roots and Shoots, Dr. Jane often advises us to not always think globally or act globally, because then you're filled with doom and gloom. So even with the SDG goals, although they are very global, big goals, what she often invites us to think is to think locally and act locally. And so that is what Roots and Shoots is all about. It's supposed to be this grassroots movement of just empowering local communities and the local youth to engage with the people around you, and for us to then to also empower youths, to equip them with the right tools. We were founded in 1991, so now we are 31 years old. you know, and I think we take a lot of inspiration from people like Greta and her ability to shape the world we live in today for the better. And ideally, we want a lot of young people to have that power and that passion for the environment and to go forth just contributing their skills towards making the world a better place. So next slide. And so while Greta does amazing work, and the work that she does is very important, we all do not have to be like Greta. Each of us, in our own way, have the ability to make a positive difference and impact. And we have to decide what difference it's going to be. And so in our own way, in our very local way, in the schools that you are at, in the community, in the university that you are at, or in your offices, I think that is the place to start, to think, what is the problem that I can solve here? And how can I go about it? And it's the smallest thing from an individual level to the things that you see around you that finally do, in the end, contribute to the SDG goals. So next slide. So for us as an NGO, you know, or in the case of Roots and Shoots, our work primarily lies with our community and our mission to empower youths. And there are direct and indirect ways that we contribute to the SDG goals. A lot of our work with the youths are through awareness and education. And so for things like responsible consumption and production to climate action, these are direct ways that we contribute. But there are also indirect ways as a community empowerment NGO that we contribute to the SDG. And this long-term ability of young skills that hopefully, you know, eventually in the future, these young people become compassionate leaders, and they take on the mandate of, you know, caring for the environment. Another way, you know, that we support the SDG goals is that we become the soundboard for a lot of government agencies or other agencies to look at the effectiveness of certain SDG goals that are being implemented, because we have a sense of what's going on the ground. So we are more in touch with the community and we know how well are some of them being implemented as well. So next slide. So what we've learned along the way is that in order to successfully implement sustainable initiatives, we need to engage with people in a way that connects with their heart. Because at the center of everything is people. In all the SDG goals, in everything, people are at the center of it. And, you know, while there's a lot of head knowledge around, very often we fail to connect the heart, because a lot of us make decisions based on the heart, on emotion. And this is something that is very central to the work that we do. How do we connect to the youth's heart, get to the heart of things? And then, because only when your head and your heart is connected, would you want to do something, when there's the emotional connection to things. And so with a lot of our projects, you know, it's awareness has to go beyond just information. It has to go to a way that connects to people at the very core of them, that then makes them want to contribute into something bigger. So next slide. So, you know, with all these concepts that I've shared, I'd like to also share some of the work that we've actually conducted. So next slide. One of our big projects is the Roots and Shoots Malaysia, which is called different ground. And so we have research to with suns, to dolphins. And so a volunteer would come to our website, register with us, and we would connect them on to these NGOs that they can volunteer with, or even have internships with. Another project that we have, next slide, next slide again, is Wartawan Eco, or eco-journalism. And so here we had partnered with the Journalism and Media Studies Center. So with youths who never would have considered or thought about, being champions for the environment, people in journalism and media. And during the pandemic, we reached out to them and we asked them to support a lot of the NGOs in Malaysia and to tell their stories in interesting ways. And so, because everyone was in lockdown and working remotely, a group of youths from this department got together and they produced these videos for these different organizations to help them either through fundraising or to just put out informational videos. Next slide. Another project that we have is EcoVira, where we try to create environmental literacy in schools. So again, in Malaysia or in that part of the world, education about the environment is not easily accessible. And so we try to go into schools and to create an extracurricular activity where they can learn about local inspirational environment heroes, and then to also develop ways to learn about the SDG goals and projects that then they can create along the way. So here's a school that did hydroponic produce. Next slide. And here's another school that learned about upcycling and created materials, hand sanitizers for their school. And next slide as well. Here's another project, and this is a project where we try to connect again people, their heart to the hand, and this was through artistic causes, through photography. Next slide. And so someone would go on this ecoeco.org website and look at the photographs, hopefully to be inspired, and then with links to then volunteer. Next. So in all these examples and projects that we've carried out, I like to leave you with this. When it comes to implementing the SDG goals at a grassroots level, on a community level, it's always important to think local, and really think of the community around you and how you can support that. And no one can ever do it alone. Always get connected to a community of like-minded people. And if you can't, you can even form one, because that is the only way to actually see results, to be a part of a community of people. And whenever you want to go about creating solutions, first is to go, we have this 4-step formula of identifying a problem first, mapping out all the solutions, taking action, and finally celebrate. The celebration of all your milestones, however small, is important. And finally, I'll leave you with this from Dr. Jane. Next slide. Only if we understand will we care, only if we care will we help, and only if we help we save. So in heads and our hearts, because when our hearts we help. So thank you much for that.
No, thank you very much, Ryan. That was so fascinating. And I love the idea of, you can make a difference if you really sort of join forces with your community. So thank you for sharing that, and wise words from Jane Goodall as well. So if you guys in the audience would like to ask Ryan a question, please drop it in the Q&A box and we'll pick them up. Unfortunately, we may not have time to get to it during this session, but as I mentioned at the beginning, there is a lobby which is open 4 days after this event, so we can discuss it over there. But thank you so much, Ryan. As we hope should be clear by now, this event is all about how we can achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, how we can make long-lasting change for people and the planet at the individual, community and system levels. Now, Ryan just spoke a little bit about community level change, but of course there are things that we can do as individuals to make a difference. For example, by spending ethically, by engaging with purpose-driven brands, and some would go as far as to say that our spending can be a form of activism or resistance. Now, we hope that this discussion, this panel discussion that we're about to kick off, will really unpick the question of whether brands can truly be ethical, sustainable, conscious, what these terms even mean, and whether or not capitalism itself actually makes businesses inherently unethical by virtue of design? So some big questions to sort of unpack in about 40 minutes, but we will do our best. So I will stop talking now and let our panelists introduce themselves. As I said before, please use the Q&A box or raise your hand to ask a question in person. You can start as early as now, but for now, over to the panelists. So I will first hand over to Jo to introduce herself if she is online.
Hi everyone, hope you can hear me. My name is Jo Chidley. I'm the co-founder of Beauty Kitchen and also Repackaging platform. Just to give a couple of big stats to start off, which really introduces me, is that we in an FMCG industry create over 161 million tonnes of single-use packaging every year. Now, I don't know how many zeros that is, but it seems like too much. 99% of this is single-use, and of the 1% that is reused, very little of it is smart and trackable. So if you think of a shampoo, for example, you want to buy the product because of the shampoo inside to clean your hair, not necessarily for the plastic bottle that holds it in there. And that's really where Beauty Kitchen has spent a lot of time within personal care and within reuse systems to understand how we can uncouple this need to just create wasteful packaging. And will I popcorn over to someone else, Cara, or are you doing it?
Feel free to popcorn. I was going to do it, but go ahead.
There you go. I'll popcorn over to Claire.
Great, you really teed me up there, thank you. I'm Claire, I'm CEO and co-founder at Wreath. We're a circular company as well, also working in the packaging space, and we help businesses adopt safe, compliant and scalable reuse systems, really looking at the data that they need to launch and scale those systems, and gather data so they can make sure they're the most optimized and efficient systems they can be. We're looking at a world where, people can pack their delivery trucks before they've even had the orders come in for single-use systems. So we need to get to that level of efficiency and optimization in the reuse systems in order to be able to compete. So we're excited to discuss all the topics today.
Amazing. Do you want to hand over to someone else to introduce themselves, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. Olga.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cara and viaGood, for having me here today. I hope you can hear me well. So I guess I'm here to sort of represent goal number 12 of the SDGs, so responsible consumption and production, and very much focusing on the fashion industry. So I am the CEO at Wearfair, which is a small sustainable fashion brand based in Scotland and Glasgow. And I founded the business, and the premise of the brand came during COVID times, when I found that we have so much work to do here in the UK with the scandals outbreak in terms of unethical production in the Midlands, involving the ultra fast fashion brands. So I went on and about to explore the possibilities of local manufacturing, and I settled down in Scotland working with small workshops, family-run businesses to produce my garments. And the premise of the brand also extends beyond sort of transparency in supply chains into transparency in pricing. So I felt like there is a massive jump between fast fashion and sustainable fashion in terms of pricing. And I really am a huge advocate for education. And I felt like we can do much more to educate consumers in order for them to make better choices. So I, on the website of Wearfair, provide a cost breakdown to make sure that everyone understands where the price comes from. But beyond that, I wanted to create a trust that I think is missing from the fashion industry. So I allow the customer to choose our margins. So it's a bit of a flexible pricing there. And just to make it much more inclusive than it is today. And beyond that, I also collaborate with artists from across the world, also making fashion more ethical, because a lot of the times the fast fashion companies, they steal, unfortunately, designs to be placed into their garments to turn them around within days. And this is also sort of the part of the industry I wanted to tackle for the brand. Thank you, and I will pass on to Alex.
Thanks, Olga. Hi, so I'm Alex. I am the co-founder and chief executive of viaGood company, and we are a soon-to-launch tech for good startup that's really focused on building a platform, a guide to finding local, independent, small, ethical businesses and experiences. And we are focused on the in real life space, so places to go, not just products to buy online. And the idea for viaGood company really came about a couple of years ago. I was doing some backpacking as like a bit of a career break, and I was particularly in Asia discovering all of these amazing like NGOs, social enterprises, kind of community-led businesses who were using their business as a way of giving back, of kind of delivering economic empowerment to you know, particularly disadvantaged groups, or were funding environmental projects. And they were amazing. And as a kind of solo backpacker looking for, you know, like authentic, meaningful experiences with heart, those are the places I wanted to go to. I didn't want to go to the kind of big tourist, you know, trap restaurants and cafes. And but it was really, really hard to find them. And I love researching, and even I was like, I'm spending far too long. And I will never forget, there was this page on the Rough Guide website, and it was like, oh yes, social enterprises are really good, but they're hard to find. Try Googling social enterprise plus the name of the city you're in. And I was like, this is insane. There must be a better way, because there are lots of people like me who want to support ethical businesses, and they are really hard to find. And so that was kind of where the idea came from. We're focusing on London initially, actually, because that's my hometown, and it's you know, it's a place I know and love, and then expanding out across the rest of the UK. And for us, it's really about saying, actually, there are so many great digital tools to find, assess more ethical products when you're purchasing things online, but actually, how do I find places to go visit in my local area or when I'm traveling around, and to make sure that the businesses that I'm the places that I'm going to are you know, are doing good, and I'm kind of being part of and supporting what they're doing. So that's really where we kind of come in, and why we were created. And I think I'm going back to you, Cara, now.
Yes, you are. Thank you all for introducing yourselves so eloquently. And yeah, I didn't know that story, Alex, about the birth of viaGood company. So thank you. That was lovely to know. Okay, so we'll get kicked off into the Q&A. The first question is probably a predictable one, and that is, what is consumer activism? And why should it be an important part of a person's action package or toolkit for action? And you can use examples from your own businesses. And this is a question I'm going to ask Joe and Olga, but others feel free to sort of come in.
I don't mind going first, Olga, if you want. So I think it all depends on your own circumstances, because at the end of the day, you need to have money for your independence, whatever that is, whether that's food, rent, energy, you know, electricity, before you then think about what else can I buy. So I think if we take it that all of the basic necessities are done for, and you've got something left over, you know, utilizing money is very much in your power to be able to define or help to define, you know, the person that you are. And everyone wants to be individual, I think. But a lot of the times, convenience, lack of time, you know, and maybe following another crowd plays a big part in that. The way that we've kind of tackled it from a commercial entity perspective in Beauty Kitchen is we want to engage with our industry. So the beauty industry is not known for its lack of consumerism. I mean, let's face it, it's not known for sustainability. But also to be able to demonstrate as a small indie brand what is truly possible. So we're the highest scoring B Corp in Europe and the UK for personal care. We're one of the highest scoring in the world. We actually have 2 impact business models, which is quite rare for any B Corp. Lots of B Corps don't even have one. We also certified So third-party certification for me is a big driver, just to give the verification. Jo Chidley might say that her products are the most sustainable ever, but it's almost more powerful if you have a third-party verification mark that's also saying the same things alongside the community of what your consumers and your customers are. And when it comes to our community of customers, the way that I formulate, so I'm a failed chemist, I'm a beauty junkie, I love the beauty industry, I love the passion, the innovation, the fact that it's predominantly female-led, and it generally leads the way in diversity. But I do think there's a lot wrong with that industry as well. And the products that we try and create is we create that are multifunctional. So rather than trying to sell 10 products, you know, for a 10-stage process, for example, generally there is a handful of products, or there's just one product that if you asked me what product would I buy that would do lots of different things, and we give that honestly. We also give all of our kind of recipes and encourage people to make their own and create their own beauty products at home with things that would be in their kitchen cupboard. And that's where the name Beauty Kitchen comes from. Olga, it's over to you.
I love that. That was great. No, I think when I first thought about this term consumer activism, I even struggled to sort of define it and to put it into words, because I think if you think of activism, you could think of very grand sort of actions. You know, you could think of some protests or picketing or petitions or whatever else. But I think as consumers, we have this sort of bottom-up power to, and I like that word, boycott. So to choose which brands or even countries we purchase from. And you know, if we go against the dubious ethical standards of some brands and we choose to purchase from other brands, which have, you know, more ethical credentials, etc. And I like the title, which says, you know, can our money help businesses put people before planet? I think we should vote with our wallets. That's sort of the bottom line. And I love that expression because as Jo was saying, we have, you know, some money left over, and it doesn't really matter how much we have, because for instance, in the fashion industry, you could be buying from, you know, high-end sustainable brands, or you could be looking into second-hand fashion, vintage fashion. You could be swapping with friends, you could be swapping with family, and you could be doing so much that does not involve a lot of money. And in that way, you can also vote with your choice beyond voting with your wallet. And I just think that as consumers, we have so much power to, by our choices, really support certain practices, whichever industry we're interested. And I know I often get stuck on fashion because that's where I work. I'm obsessed with it. And then we should also kind of look beyond. So there's, you know, I've started looking into sort of bar shampoos and things like that, because I think I can do more. And as it becomes more accessible, I think we should all start being these activists, citizen activists, rather than just consumers. And I think there is a lot of choice that is popping up, and it's very accessible. So in that way, we have no excuse.
I completely second that. We do have no excuse, particularly now we know that, you know, all of you and your wonderful businesses exist. And I think the main reason I asked both Jo and Olga that question is because beauty and hair products and sort of personal care products and clothes are obviously things that we need and things that are essential. And, you know, you can see them as a luxury, but also mostly we see them as essential. So I think having knowledge that real brands that are not greenwashing, which we'll come into later, exist, that are creating ethical, sustainable products, I think that's always really encouraging, because it makes things super easy. We need to buy shampoo, we need to buy soap, we need to buy clothes and t-shirts. So thank you for that. That was great. We had a question about sustainability in the Q&A chat. And it was, how do we define sustainability? But I'd also like to build on that with a question that I get to ask as a moderator's privilege. And that is very similar. What is the difference between circular economy and the concept of circularity or conscious production? And how can people check whether purchasing choices are truly ethical at all levels in the supply chain? So it's expanding a little bit on the sustainability question. And I'm going to hand that over to Claire first, and then to Joe.
Cool. So there's some fantastic developments in supply chain traceability tracking. There's some companies like they'll basically track everything in the supply chain and let you as a customer access information about that. In terms of the world of beauty, I think Cult Beauty offers this in partnership with
Provenance.
Yes, Provenance. I mean, mind blank in the day. Yeah, with Provenance. And for me, that's incredibly empowering as a consumer. I also always take the view of, like, obviously, I don't mean to be particularly cynical, but obviously in the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of greenwashing being played out in the press. We've seen a lot of companies like H&M get their green credentials really questioned and actually had to pull back their marketing campaigns. And so for me, I always ask myself, is what I'm buying requiring virgin materials to be made? Obviously, in the case of things like shampoos, you're not going to be having recycled content in the actual product, but you absolutely can in the packaging. Or in the case of clothes, is it brand new materials, or is there any recycled content in there, or am I buying secondhand? So I think that's like a very quick kind of sense check I always do when it comes to purchasing stuff new myself.
That's super helpful. I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I think, yeah, the concept of circularity and circular economy and sustainability as a whole seems so meta and big. So I think breaking it down into sections like that, Claire, is incredibly helpful. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to sort of build on that. Maybe Joe.
Yeah, I don't mind building on that. I mean, I think what we know already is that there's a certain number of resources in the planet, yeah, and we keep using them. And it's really that simple. If we keep using them at the rate that we're using them at and not reusing them, then we're not going to have anything left. And that's simple mathematics. You don't need to be an accountant to work that out. Because a lot of the times, I think big companies in particular, when we have been interacting with them, is that they want to wait for more data and wait until they understand targets or understand, you know, to the nth degree of detail. But if you can bring it back down to really simple terms, it prevents you from being paralyzed into action. And that's what I'm always really conscious of. I think when people start talking about conscious consumerism and we should stop buying stuff, I'm not really sure that speaks to any human being in a positive way. I think it's coming at it in an engaging angle and getting them to be nudged along. So, you know, at the end of the day, I know that if somebody buys our products over other beauty products, because of the different analysis that we've done behind the scenes, you're going to be more sustainable. But that isn't really a nice thing to say. It's like, come and buy my stuff, don't buy somebody else's. But the point here is, if I then engage with the industry, which is what I'm doing, you know, I'm trying to help other businesses within the beauty industry to make some of these simple changes. And that was really where the reusable packaging aspect came into play. And somebody has put in the chat here around, can you go over which materials are sustainable or not? For example, even though metal and stone is natural, it is sustainable, and do they actually recycle things properly? But let's be clear about the science here, yeah? When it comes to entropy, and what I mean by that, if you think of a glass bottle and you crush it down to recycle it and then build it back up, rather than a glass bottle that has been washed, dried, and has the appropriate cleaning protocol to then be reused, you don't need to be a scientific person to know which one uses less energy, which one uses less resources. So I think what happens is that greenwashing, marketing, tend to look at some of these things and try to find a way to make money to commercialize it. And that's really from an industry, that's in every industry across the globe. And for me, that's worrying, but I think it's almost a distraction when we talk about greenwashing, rather than focusing in on, let's try and make things more circular. There's always going to be greenwashing. It's always going to happen, even when we have a more circular economy.
To comment on that, I think the point that Joe's making is a really important one. Is like, everyone's always going to have preferences. Everyone has different types of hair. Everyone has different colors of skin. Like, we all have different product needs. And so the idea that like one brand will do it all for everybody isn't feasible or realistic. And what we need to do is try and, as an industry, and I mean that beyond the beauty industry as well, but like across globally, we need to increase those standards and those expectations from consumers.
I completely agree. And I think something that sort of, I guess, seconds that in terms of different industries and their different approaches and the different requirements of different types of people is how to sort of unpick this concept and sort of cut through the greenwashing noise in the hospitality or experience spaces. So for example, you know, going to dine out or going to the cinema or any sort of experience, because I think while it's difficult with products to sort of, you know, see if they are truly doing what they say they're doing, particularly in restaurants and other areas where you don't know where the products are coming from, you don't understand the supply chains, it can be, I guess, difficult. So I don't know, Alex, if you have anything to sort of come in on with that.
Yeah, thank you. And I obviously support and echo a lot of what's been said. And I think in many ways, the kind of hospitality experience space is maybe catching up with some of the product work that's been happening. And I think that's partly just due to the nature in which we research and purchase products. You know, we can go online, spend some time really looking at stuff. And I think what you're starting to see though, and what's been really interesting is that a lot of it is being led actually by the food industry. So if I take the food industry as an example, you know, there's been a real resurgence and movement in the kind of how are we using seasonal produce, you know, how are we sourcing locally, how are we minimizing our food waste? And actually a lot of that, I think if you're in the UK, you especially will see that that's coming from the chefs, and the restaurants themselves are driving that. And I think that's really exciting because the food industry has huge amounts of, it has huge challenges, and there are, you know, big repercussions for our planet with the amount of food waste. And so I think for me, there is still there is a really exciting movement happening. I think that and it's becoming more commonplace. I think where I still see a gap is in the depth of the storytelling. And I think some of this is just to do with timing. Some of it maybe skill set as well. And, you know, but if you even roll back like 5 years ago, I don't think anybody, like 5 or 6 years ago, we weren't even really talking about supply chain at all. Like, people didn't really talk about it as consumers, and now you can't get away from it. And I think for me, one of the big things with hospitality and experiences that I want to know is, I love seeing places that have a living wage sticker in their shop window. I think that for me fundamentally is like the number one thing. Are you a business that pays your staff well and treats your staff well? Because that really matters. And you know, that's the kind of place I want to be a part of. And then I think you're starting to see more businesses that are talking about actually what they're doing with their waste product. They're describing who their suppliers are. They name them on the menu. So where their meat comes from, if you happen to still, you know, eat meat, you know, why they're serving certain things because they're in season, what they're doing with their waste. And there's some, you know, there's some real innovation happening. I also, for example, think, and this is where you get into sort of more of the circularity in that space, but are they partnered with the likes of Too Good To Go or Olio? So when they do produce waste, are they then finding a way of reusing that? And there's some incredible innovation happening in other sectors like the coffee industry. So people who are partnering to have their coffee shops who are partnering to have their waste coffee grounds sent to be turned into biofuels, which I think is an incredible innovation, because it's like, you know, that's properly one man's trash is like another person's treasure. And so I think, you know, when I'm looking at does something feel sustainable? And for me, often sustainability is around, clearly is very heavily a term that's really linked to the environment. You know, I want to look at I look at through three lenses. So how do they treat their people, their employees? What are they doing there? Are their workers paid fairly? Does that go all the way through their supply chain? Who are the people they're employing? And then the planet, and what are they doing there? And then, you know, thirdly, actually, is there a community angle to the business? Are they giving back to their wider community in some way? And that for me is the kind of where I look at the three things. And you know, I think one of the things that I think really quickly unravels in the greenwashing space, just as a final point, is that what you often find, I think personally, is somebody you'll have a big brand who talks about one specific item in their line or one specific line of their entire production. And actually for me, the businesses that are really trying to be sustainable are thinking about how it flows through everything that they do. And it's a much broader kind of core part of their business and how they approach everything. But also recognizing that no one's perfect. You know, we're not perfect as consumers, like businesses aren't perfect, they're just run by people. And so there's also like that transparency and the fact we're all on a journey. And I think that's really important, and how we support, recognize, celebrate, without kind of also going into like, you know, big black and white on who's bad and who's good. And for me, it's like who's clearly trying to do better, who cares, and who is taking steps in the right direction. And those are the kind of brands that I want to go visit. Plus also, by the way, they're doing like super cool, amazing stuff. I love, you know, some of the things we've heard about tonight. And so I'm like, that's a really incredible experience for me as well. It's not all like, you know, gratuitous kind of virtue signaling. It's like, I also have a really exciting time and learn new stuff and think it's really cool. And I'm really proud to be part of the community of their customers.
I love that. I really love that. And I love that In Good Company, Alex's company, really makes it easy and accessible to find those gems and to find people who pay living wage, as you say, but also care about their supply chains. I think it's really exciting that we're now in a space where we are talking about it, and it is difficult to find businesses that are truly ethical and that are not just doing it for sort of press and PR. But I love that we're all working in a space where we're trying to shout out those people that are doing good things and that are really trying to put people and the planet first. So I love that. We have a super interesting question that I'd love to know the answer to from Bahrat. I hope I pronounced that right. Does the sustainability discourse fit in the modern socioeconomic needs of the developing nations? It's a very, very big question. And I don't know, first of all, before I give it to someone, does anyone want to tackle that question? Or should I nominate someone?
I just want to say one line. I think when it comes to developing countries, they've got the opportunity to leapfrog from all the mistakes that other countries have made. And I find it fascinating. So for example, Uganda, which is somewhere that I love and I've had the privilege of visiting on quite a few occasions, they have one of the fastest growing entrepreneurial cosmetic scientists, i.e. creating beauty products in the world. And one of the aspects that we are working on with some grassroots projects is how can they have a supply of reusable packaging to be able to leapfrog over, not having to use single-use packaging.
Definitely, I think leapfrogging in more than just sort of the consumer activist / purpose-driven business space. We can definitely learn from, in terms of renewable energy and other areas of innovation to sort of tackle the climate crisis. So yes to leapfrogging, 100%. Does anyone else want to come in with any thoughts to that question? I mean, it is a big question, but a very important one.
Yeah, I'll come in with something. It's a big question. It's like one I might actually I'll go away and have a reflect on, and then put something back in the lobby, which I know is staying open, Cara. But I think there's also something that, like, we have to recognise that we have been reliant and using developing nations for our own needs and in our own industries, right? So huge amounts of our clothes are made in what would be called developing nations. Coffee. By the way, coffee is something I've been looking at a lot recently, and I drink a lot of coffee. So coffee's been something I've been learning about, and you can see what's happening to the environment and communities, around the world, both in terms of like what's being taken, how companies are paying and treating, workers overseas. And then actually also in terms of what we're like throwing back at them literally with our waste. I mean, the photos of the kind of fast fashion landfills in Africa are horrendous. And so I think that the kind of becoming more sustainable is key for those countries. I think it's also really important that we don't enforce our own views onto different communities. So a lot of the social enterprises that I kind of know and work with, ones who are selling products made by female artisans, or are importing coffee, like, it's actually how can we work with and support what people living in these countries and places and communities are trying to do, and support doing that better and pay them better wages, but also help them invest back in their local areas and local economies, and not us just kind of decide what is right or wrong for them, because actually we've been doing that for too long.
I completely agree, and I'd also like to add that I think particularly in developing countries, there are a lot of models that really work that we can actually draw from. And I think it's a matter of, as you say, Alex, like taking a justice lens and an equity lens, and seeing what actually is happening there, and not assuming that because, everyone's sort of now more conscious about sustainability because it's starting to affect us in Europe, that we have all of the solutions, because actually often indigenous peoples and people living in places that are more prone to crises are actually very, very good at adapting, and very, very good at protecting our planet, much more than the global north has historically. So I love that. We are sort of running out of time, so I'm going to group some of these questions. We had a great question from Sally about inflation, and obviously I guess the energy crisis as well. People have less money to spend. So how does that affect consumers and the ability to sort of, be more picky with your purchases? We also had a question from Sarah about how we can work together as different players in the sustainability space to better accelerate consumer actions and change. And I want to group those questions all into a bigger question about capitalism as a whole, because I think there is a question as to whether or not there is a line to be drawn between consumer activism and overconsumption. If we can even use, our purchasing power as a form of activism, and is there in fact no ethical consumption under capitalism? I think all of these are very big questions, and particularly now when people are feeling the pinch. Is it possible to actually be sustainable? I think that's a key question that needs to be answered. And I will pin that over to Olga, because I just saw you unmuted.
Yes. I do believe it's possible. I believe that under capitalism, we all have choices we make, and we can make better choices, or we can make the unethical choices in terms of how we produce, what we produce, how we deliver it, how we communicate it. And I mean, we're all operating under capitalism, and we're all doing amazing things, and we are competing, but in a very different way. I think we're differentiating each other. We are bringing new products into the market, and we are we are allowed to do it because of this free market. And I think these principles are amazing, and I think we should stick to them. But of course, we cannot control how people behave, and there will always be the odd ones out. And I think the more we push for change, the more we can actually capitalize on capitalism, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm not sure if there is an alternative, or if it's coming very soon. But I think even under the system as it is, we can still push forward for better better choices.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. This is the system we're in. So I hope so. But does anyone have anything else to sort of add to that, to sort of build on it, maybe to come at it from a different angle? I see quite a few people waiting to speak. So first come, first serve.
I can jump in there. I get overwhelmed with the idea that the only way to make a difference is to overthrow the entire system. I think that's a way to create paralysis. But I do believe that the system is fundamentally skewed and badly designed. So if I take things like packaging, at the moment, you as a taxpayer are subsidizing a single-use system because you are paying taxes to have a waste infrastructure that predominantly burns, incinerates, or poorly recycles and downgrades packaging. We have to ask ourselves why we let that happen and why that is continuing. And, to come back to Sally's question about inflation, why are we choosing to spend our resources in that way when really we should be asking why we can't get the products we want and need delivered in a way that doesn't have that kind of overhead attached to it, where it's literally going into junk and then contributing negatively to our long-term climate objectives, the pollution in our countries and the air that we breathe. Like, to me, that's a fundamentally badly designed system. So I actually wouldn't put that back to capitalism. That's just a badly designed system. And for me, that's an intervention that makes a lot of sense to tackle first before we go and try and overthrow the entire capitalist system.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I also think that we can do things simultaneously, work with what we've got, but also try and amend it to some extent, because there are definitely some pitfalls. So yeah, I think it's not really an either or from my perspective anyway. It's definitely like let's work with what we've got, but then also like try and make it even better and function in a way that is just and that isn't exploitative. We are almost out of time, but I do want to also pull on Sally's question about inflation, and I'm guessing as well the sort of energy crisis and the fact that people have less money, and pair it with the final question about greenwashing, which we've spoken about quite a lot, but not necessarily in relation to inflation. So I wanted to ask primarily Olga, but others feel free to come in. We've got about 4 minutes to answer this question. And how do people or consumers, how are they able to sort of cut through the noise, particularly from big brands such as H&M, who traditionally have more competitive prices, particularly Shein now with sort of ultra fast fashion, and I'm sure there are other examples outside of the fashion industry as a whole. Now that people have less money, and these brands are sort of coming out with ethical lines and conscious lines, how can people cut through the noise, particularly now that they're feeling the pinch? Because it's always, I guess, a bit more, yeah, it's a bit easier to sort of buy things that are cheaper, particularly when you feel like you have less and less money. So how can we sort of battle that in this current context that we're living in? And that's for Olga first.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. That's an amazing question. And I was actually reading the news in the fashion industry precisely about Kourtney Kardashian being the new sort of sustainability ambassador for Boohoo. And I mean, it's incredible to call someone a sustainability ambassador where you're releasing 40,000 styles from the top of my head a year as a brand, as an ultra fast fashion brand. And then really, based on the 40,000 styles, there's a 45-piece collection that is, dubbed as sustainable. and most of which it comes from recycled materials, etc. But on the grand scheme of things, I think as a consumer, we should really just go back to our sort of common sense and just, so in terms of cutting through the greenwashing, go back to your common sense and understand that, you know, a brand that is producing so much then sells the product at an incredibly low price, meaning that this is so low that, I don't know, a t-shirt can be deemed as disposable. So, you know, a price range of £1 to £3. If you start questioning these, just using your common sense, really, does that mean it's sustainable? Can this really be ethical? Is it possible to do it? And I always sort of go back to the websites that brands have, and I go on there and I try to research a little bit in terms of what do they have under that tab of sustainability, and how much detail do they go into, and can I really trust that information? Do they give enough for me to be able to buy into what they're saying? And I think fundamentally, if a brand sells things that is too cheap and too good to be true, it probably is. Other sort of resources in the sustainable fashion or fashion in general, there are many, and one of my favorite is Good on You. So it's a platform where you can actually go on and read about the sustainability credibility criteria around animal welfare, human welfare, the transparency and all that stuff. And it's rated. It gives you sort of a score based on all that. And I think it's a very fast way to cross-check a brand that you might be interested in purchasing from, because even seemingly sustainable brands score pretty badly in there. So it's an interesting way to double check. But I think quite generally, I would always sort of go back to my common sense and just double question what I'm reading, and does it really make sense what they're sort of claiming.
I love that. Thank you, Olga. And I feel like we could talk about this all day, and I'll definitely check out that tool and share it with you all via email afterwards, because I think we all definitely need to use it. Unfortunately, that is us out of time for the panel discussion. But as I say, we have a lobby that's open for the next 4 days, so we can carry on the discussion over there. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for being so insightful and wise and incredible. And I personally got a lot out of this session. So thank you so much. Oh, Joe, you're unmuted.
Sorry.
Okay, so yes, thank you. So that calls the end to our panel discussion. And next up, we're going to move to the wonderful Eric Rowden, who's going to talk about the snowball effect and the power of technology in instigating system change. Eric is a senior vice president for global strategic partnerships at Care2.com, managing a global team of strategists who help hundreds of nonprofits, charities, and causes connect with donors and supporters online. Prior to his work at Care2, Eric led a coalition of nearly 200 organizations to successfully reauthorize the national law governing fishing in the US. Moreover, Eric has experience working on political and issue campaigns from Wyoming to South Africa. So over to you, Eric. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm honored to be here. And so I'm just really here to tell the story of Care2 and what we found as a way of really just making it easy for people to make a difference. And I think it fits really well with the panelists who were just speaking. Care2 was founded in 1998, and we're actually 2 weeks older than Google. Turns out they had a slightly more profitable business model, but we're quite happy with the model that we arrived at. And the purpose of creating Care2 was that our founder, his father was an ornithology professor. So he grew up traveling all around the world, going to these amazing, gorgeous rainforests. And, you know, while his father was studying birds and then witnessing this horrifying habitat destruction and deforestation that was happening in some of the most precious landscapes that have ever existed. And like many people, you see something horrible happening and you think, well, how can I change that? How can I stop that? And it did occur to him to create a nonprofit. But his conclusion was, it's not really his thing, in terms of sort of he was very interested in creating businesses when he grew up and so forth. But also he felt like, there are a lot of nonprofits that are doing great work, and we probably don't need another nonprofit. So he created Care2 with the idea that that commerce and a business could be a force for good in the world, that you could that not all capital was evil, basically. And so listening to the panel that just concluded, it really resonated with me, because that is very much where we're coming from. Although Care2 doesn't sell material products, the idea was that you can have a business and that business can make a difference. So we started in 1998, but in 2000 we launched the petition platform, or Care2 did. I was actually one of the first 100 customers when I was managing that ocean fisheries campaign to end overfishing and other problems in U.S. Ocean fisheries. And one of the first things, in these campaigns, Care2 launched their petition platform, and then they reached out to environmental campaigns and other NGOs and said, hey, we have this community and we'd like to bring it to bear to help you with your campaigns. And myself and everyone that Care2 spoke with was immediately, really excited. It's like, we could use all the help we can get. And so, I've been involved with Care2 in one way or the other for 20 years now. Since the launch of the petition platform, there's been nearly 1.2 billion signatures on our petitions. And we've grown our community to over 60 million people. There have been nearly 500,000 petitions have been created by individuals. And that's a really remarkable thing. So, tens of millions of people have signed thousands and thousands of petitions, and anybody can create a petition on Care2 for free. They do it every day. We have hundreds of petitions created on any given day. And the idea behind the petition wasn't necessarily groundbreaking, although we were back then it was new to have it online. And one of the things that inspired creating that specific tool was that there were two things that combined. One, we wanted to create a way that people could sort of build community through word of mouth. And also, back then, there were these chain emails that would get forwarded back and forth, just year after year. You'd get this same email forwarded to you about, one of the most famous ones in America is this scandal about Mrs. Fields cookies and how they were doing something wrong. And so this person has found the recipe and they're sharing it so people can boycott Mrs. Fields and bake their own cookies. These chain emails just went on and on and on, and they were completely ineffective because they were just an echo chamber. But knowing that this was happening and seeing this, our founder said, well, this has just got to be a better way. And thus we created the petition tool. And the idea was that this way, somebody has an idea, or they see something, they see an injustice or an opportunity to make a better place, make the world a better place. They can create the petition in a specific location, and then they can tell all their friends and family about that. And they can tell their friends and family and so on, but everybody's coming back to the same place. And that's how you create the snowball effect. So you start out with one signature. And in some cases we've had petitions reach over 1 million petitions, over 1 million signers in just a couple of days, because one person sees an injustice or sees something that they think needs to change. And in some cases it resonates with people in a really massive way. And that is, so being able to empower individuals all over the world to make a difference, to see ways that they want to make the world a better place and take advantage of that, is great. And so, you know, we think that part of the goal, or the part of the benefits of technology that we have today, is that you can reach a lot of people and you can create a lot of change. Obviously, there's a lot of downsides to that. You have QAnon and various other conspiracy theories and things that are going on out there, but there are also platforms where people who genuinely want to help fight global warming and protect human rights and fight human trafficking and so forth can go on and see success. And so there have been thousands of victories from these petitions, and that's really what keeps us going. Is when we hear, sometimes we hear it in the news, that a petition that was started on Care2, and we find out in the news that this thing was successful. Sometimes we hear it directly from the person who created the petition, or if we've partnered with an NGO, they will come back and let us know that this has happened. So just a couple of examples. In the city of Southampton in England, it was basically criminal to be to sleep rough, to live in experiencing homelessness, is how they describe it in the US. And so if you were found sleeping on the street, you could be fined or put in jail, etc. And there was a petition that was created by a local local resident of Southampton, and that helped overturn those laws and regulations, so that they basically decriminalized being homeless. It's not as if people are going out of their way to try and be homeless. Another petition helped close the last fur farm in Germany, which there had been progress in closing down fur farms, and animal rights and animal welfare, really a big issue with our community as well. Another example of an individual making a really important difference, and this was actually created by an employee of Care2. She was traveling by train from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C., and she was a new mother and had a very young infant child, and needed to pump so that she could store her milk for her child. And there were no sanitary, hygienic, safe, clean places to do that in these train stations. You basically had the option of doing it in public or going into a washroom in the train station. And the train station washrooms in America are horrifying. They're just really horrible. So she just thought, well, I know exactly what I can do here. And within a matter of months, Amtrak had committed. I mean, this petition got tens of thousands of signatures right away, because it's so obvious that this is a relevant, real need that and a change that can easily be made. And so within less than a couple of months, Amtrak put out a statement committing to having lactation stations in all of their Amtrak stations on the East Coast that were commuter stations. And those are now in place. And if you're ever in Washington, D.C. and go to Union Station, there's a safe, clean, hygienic place. Many of you may have noticed, and this may have happened in different countries at different paces, but there was a petition that was started several years ago targeting Starbucks and saying that they needed to get rid of these single-use straws. Single-use plastic, obviously, as we've discussed, is a big problem. And this petition also got hundreds of thousands of signatures, and Starbucks has gotten rid of single-use plastic straws in the US, and I think it's global now at this point, and transitioned to lids that basically have sippy lids. And they got rid of that, and they specifically responded to the petition. And so I'm sure that there were many other people reaching out to Starbucks, encouraging that change and that action. But they specifically, in a statement, responded to the petition. And just recently, there's so many, but just one more example is in the US, some people that own house cats will have their nails, their toenails, their claws removed, and surgically. It's called declawing, and it's so that the cats don't scratch up their furniture. But it's really horrible for the cats to have that happen. And if they ever were to get loose and be outdoors, they would be defenseless because they wouldn't have claws. And New York State has banned that procedure, and other states are following. So there have just been thousands of examples of this. At the end of the day, there are the underlying power of this is that where there are tools out there, an individual can see a need for a change and can take action. And through tools like our petition platform and others, change.org followed us several years after we started, and now have become a charity themselves. And there are, there are other tools out there, but there are ways that people can make a difference, and can, as single person's individual action, can snowball by reaching out to others and bringing all these voices together to make a difference. So and really a lot of this comes down to making it very easy to do. Creating a petition is very easy, making it very accessible. Anybody with access to the internet, whether it's on a mobile phone or a tablet or what have you, anybody with access to Wi-Fi essentially can create a petition. And so that this can be a powerful tool that can and is used all over the world. We had a petition launched in Vietnam in July, and out of the blue, we saw these signatures. All of our dashboards were going crazy, and there was a petition around dog meat trade in Vietnam that just exploded and got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of signatures right away. So that's where we come from and what we're doing, and what we love is that we're able to partner with NGOs. We partner with brands that have a sustainability-based mission that really want to not only engage in advocacy from a consumer standpoint, but also engage directly in advocacy for campaigns. We did a fantastic campaign with Patagonia several years ago when Barack Obama was still president, but towards the end of his second term, that called on him to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil drilling. And that was one of his last acts as president, was to reinforce those protections that had been under threat and are continually come back under threat. But that's just an example of partnering with a brand and I'm sure you've all heard about Patagonia's massive change this week. So we just, that's where we're coming from, is whether you're a brand or an individual on the street and you need a crosswalk or a zebra crossing in your neighborhood, or you want to take on climate change, there are ways to do that. So we're super excited to be partnering with viaGood and have viaGood featuring these petitions, Care2 petitions in the app. It's really fantastic, and we're truly grateful, because being able to get help get these petitions in front of more people just helps amplify those voices and continues to help make the world a better place.
Thank you so much, Eric. And we are incredibly happy to be part of this community and to have you on board as well. And as Eric has said, all of our petitions within the viaGood app are Care2 petitions. And yeah, I think as we've just heard, I previously, before working with Care2, thought of petitions more in terms of big level sort of meta change, but actually it is that, but also petitions can create a difference for just individuals as well, which is part of their power, really. And it's not difficult at all to sign a petition, but you could really change someone's life or a whole community's life. So thank you so much for that, Eric. That was incredibly inspiring and a good reminder of why we have petitions within the viaGood app as well. So thank you. And as always, oh, sorry, go ahead. As always, you can ask Eric any questions right now during this main webinar, or during the lobby section, which we will share a link for shortly. But before we all head off to the sort of post-event networking, I want to hand over to Mikkel Walter for a final time to sort of have some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Cara, and thank you very much to all of you who are watching this event, this conference. I would like thanks very much to Eric from Care2 for the whole cooperation with between viaGood and Care2, and for wonderful story he spoke about, he said. And I would like also thanks to our amazing panelists. It was very useful. I really enjoyed it. But I would like to jump at the beginning of this event to Ryan's very inspirational presentation. Ryan, he used a quote from Jane Goodall, and this quote was, "Only if we understand will we care. Only if we care, we will help. Only if we help, shall all be saved." So I would like to connect this quote to our activity. I mean, what we do to project viaGood. And this quote has three parts. The first one is, only if we understand will we care. So viaGood's got a really big part of educational to better understand causes. You can read many pages about the problem and solution and solving the problem. And also, I believe that this event, this conference was useful to better understand all the space of sustainability and activism. The second part of the quote is, only if we care will we help. So I believe that viaGood will be a part of helping. And if you really want to help us right now with development of viaGood, and you've got an iPhone, please download the viaGood app from the App Store. Check it and give us feedback, because it will be very useful and we will really appreciate it. And for every this feedback, we will donate $25 to the charity you will choose. And in the 2023, we are looking forward for Android version as well, and for the official launch of the whole project. And the last part of this quote from Jane Goodall is, only if we help shall all be saved. So I believe that we all will be a part of saving our wonderful world for future generations. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Mikael. And I think all that's left to say is we're going to head over in about 3-4 minutes to a post-event networking session, which is in a slightly different room. So my colleague Susanna is going to paste a link to the lobby, which will look like the screen that's currently on your screen. And you can see at the bottom on the left-hand side, there is an icon that says main event. That's where we are currently. And to the right of that, there is a post-networking box that you can join through the link that she's just dropped. I've just seen it there. And also, as I mentioned, if there was anything that you didn't think we discussed that you want to carry on the discussion for, then please use the lobby chat on the right-hand side of this page, which will also be accessible through the link that Susanna just dropped. So yeah, big thank you to all of our speakers. That was so informative, and I hope you all enjoyed it, everybody listening from wherever you're listening in the world. We will see you shortly at the networking event. Thank you very much.